So I think it's actually time to get this piece of steel turned into an actual functioning knife. So to do that, we have got to get this thing hardened and tempered. So with this being a Damascus made of 1084 and 15N20 with a core that's 80 CRV2, we're actually going to be hardening for 80 CRV2. The good thing about it is that 80 CRV2 is actually very similar to heat treating the 1084. The only difference is that 80 CRV2 requires a soak, whereas 1084 you can basically just get that up to temperature and then quench it right away. The 80 CRV2 requires like, I don't know, 10-15 minute soak. I mean, it doesn't require it, but if you want to get the most out of it and ensure that it's hardened, that's the way to do it. So anywhere you buy your steel, they're pretty much going to have a little chart like this that tells you how to heat treat their steels. And this is from the New Jersey Steel Baron. And we are going to do a normalization cycle because this has gone through a whole bunch of transformation. The 80 CRV2 not so much, but we're still going to normalize it. So to normalize, we're going to heat this thing up to 1650 degrees, and then we're going to pull it from the kiln and let it cool down to black. Once it's cooled down to black, we're going to put it back in at 1500 degrees. And then once it's hit 1500 degrees, we're going to pull it out and let it cool to black again. And then the third cycle is we're going to heat it up to 1350. And then once it's hit 1350, we're going to pull it out and let it go to black. That kind of resets the grain structure and makes it more manageable steel. So after we've done that, so we're going to use Parks AAA as the quenchant, and we're going to heat that up to about 120 degrees. It doesn't say anything about that in here, but that's typically what I do. So the austenizing soak, 5 to 15 minutes it says. So I typically would go like 10 minutes, just go in between there. And then if you need to go a little longer, you know, whatever, you've got that. And here there's a note that says not to put the blade in your heat treat oven when it's cold. So that means don't put the blade in the oven and then heat it up. Actually get the oven heated up, then put your blade in it. Again, that's another thing that you probably just don't have to do, but it helps with the final result. And then our austenizing temperature is 1465 to 1480, which I'll probably go in between there somewhere or the high side. I'd always do the low side when I'm trying to get a hamon. That way you're cooling a lot quicker. And then after that, we'll be tempering. And the temper, they've even got a page for that that'll tell you what you should have as far as hardness goes, Rockwell hardness, depending on what temperature you do. So when you're doing your heat treat, if you have an oven, these are great to follow. If you have a forge, you just kind of have to get as close as you can because the forge isn't quite as accurate as a heat treat oven. So with that, I'm sure most of you have heard of this book right here. I've had this book for quite a while, and I've read it once, and I've visited several chapters many times. It's a pretty amazing book. It's written by Laren Thomas, who is Devin Thomas's son. I hope I'm getting that right, but pretty sure it's his son. Anyway, this has got crazy amounts of useful information if you're curious about how the whole metallurgy aspect of knife making works. This is a fantastic book. He's also got a YouTube channel if you prefer to just watch it. I always like to visit his channel. And then I know he's got another book coming out, so I'll probably get that and read that one too. But anyway, if you have the means, grab the book, read it. I mean, it's a lot like textbook, so it's not the funnest thing in the world to read, but there's, like I said, crazy amounts of information in here. So I'm going to bust out the oven and start getting it heated up to 1650. And while that's heating up, I've got to drill a hole in here because my kiln is a vertical oven. So here's the oven I use. I know a few of you have already seen this, but I really like this kiln. It's the 21-inch GenKen vertical Airbath. It's got the little tap controller so you can store all of your info, all of your schedules that you go to a lot. So I've got one pre-made for 1650, 1500, and 1350. I've got one pre-made for 1084 heat treats, 15 and 20, 52-100, like all the different steels that I use consistently. And it's nice. Top comes open. You just hang your stuff in the little rack that's in here. And I like the fact that gravity is the only thing really affecting, well, outside of heat, gravity is the only thing really affecting whether or not that steel is going to bow just sitting in the kiln. So I just like it. So one other really cool thing about this tap controller is that it, shows you where your heat is. And I mean, you can get in there and keep track of how much it costs to do specific heat treats. It's kind of cool. And then also you can hook it up to your phone and you get notifications as to when the heats are ready and all that stuff if you don't want to just stick around. So this knife is all prepped. I drilled the hole and I put the little pin in there. You have to have the pin for this kiln because it will just hang. So you have to drill a hole in there, or they send these little wire pieces. And I'm assuming these are to be used when you have, when you're doing stainless and it's wrapped in film. That way you can just, can't really get that on there because I've never really used it, but there you go. You just fit that on there and then it kind of holds it in place and you can hang this whole thing on there. But they send a whole bunch of different things. You can see I've used drill bits to actually hang my stuff on, and as you can tell, I've actually left this inside the kiln. That's where I store it, and I've left it in there before and forgot it was in there until I start smelling burning paper. So we're almost up to heat, so I'm gonna go toss this in the kiln. Okay, so basically you just have to, get a pair of tongs, open this up, and I'll just put it right in the middle, hang it on the rack, close it up, and you just have to let it get to 1650, and then we'll pull it out to cool. So it's up to 1650. I'm going to let it soak just a minute before I take it out and put it on the cooling rack. And while I'm waiting, this is my quench tank. I know a few of you have seen this before, but might as well show it again since this is a heat treating episode. So all I did was I took some tube, I welded it to a square plate on the bottom. I got a hinge and welded a square plate to that for the lid. So this just keeps all the crap out of it. So when I'm ready to quench, I pop this open. I've got my little piece of steel that I heat up and dunk in there to heat it up. And then I've got my rag. And then, I forgot to mention that I welded a couple pieces of rebar onto the side of it so I can pick it up and move it. So I leave the rag there. I quench, and then everything's good. Once I'm done, just close it back up, move it back into its respective corner, and then it's out of the way. So I'm going to pull this out now and put it on the cooling rack over here. So the other good thing about the kiln is that after an amount of time you can kind of memorize the colors. So, you know, 1650 was kind of a really bright red to dull orange color. When you're at like 1500, it's a really dull red color. So when you actually do heat treat stuff in your forge, you can watch the color and you know what colors are what temperatures. But anyway, this is my little cooling rack, and basically all I did was took a piece of steel, drilled a bunch of holes in it to make slots, and then I just hold it inside of my vise, and I can do several knives at a time. If I've got 5 or 6 or 7 of them, I can do them all at the same time. But this holds them really nicely, and does a really good job for a cooling rack. So when this loses all of its color, what I typically do is I take this and I will put it in a shadow somewhere under my bench or wherever it's darker in the shop, and I'll make sure that all the color's gone from this, and then we'll throw it back in the kiln at 1500 degrees. So I'm leaving this lid open so that some of the heat can escape. And what I'm going to do is close the lid and then start my 1500 degree schedule. And we're at, the kiln's at a little over 1300 degrees right now. So it's a good time to pull the knife back over and throw it in the kiln. And we've cooled the black, so pop that in there. Let it heat to 1500, and then we'll pull it out again, put it on the cooling rack until it's black, and heat this to 1350. Okay, we're up to 1500 on this. I'm going to let this soak for just a few minutes. You don't have to let it soak, but I just tend to like to let it soak just in case, just to make sure that we're heated, you know, all the way through the steel. Okay, let's pull this out, let it cool. So you can see nice 1500 degree color, nice dull red. Onto the cooling rack. So this is cooled the black, and we've got the 1350 schedule heating up. So we're going to pop that back in there, let it heat to 1350, give it a couple minutes to soak, and then back to the cooling rack. Here we are again, 1350 with a little bit of a soak. You can see that's barely got any color. You can almost call that purple if you want. Not really, but barely any color. So onto the cooling rack. Okay, while that's cooling, I'm going to get this schedule started, because we're going to go up to about, we're going to do 1480. So I think I've got a schedule that's at about what we need. There's a 1500, 1475. I think we can do that 1475. And we're going to start this with no weighting. And there we are. So this is going to heat up to, oh, we're already at 1475. Oh, no, we're not. I'm reading the wrong number. So by the time this gets up to about 1400, I'm going to pop the knife back in, and then the knife is going to cool it down just a hair and slow the ramp speed. And then once we get up to our 1475, it's going to soak. I'm going to leave it in the full soak. I think it's got a 15-minute hold time on this. So we're just going to let it sit there, and because I'm not heat treating anything else, I don't need the extra time. So we're just gonna let this soak to be safe and then quench it. Okay, I just checked this and we're actually all ready to black. So I'm gonna throw it back in the kiln and get this thing up to heat and soaking. So we've had about a 12-minute soak, and I'm just gonna go ahead and quench this right now. So quick quench and agitate it just a little bit for about 10 seconds. You don't want to build a vapor barrier around it and keep it from cooling as quickly as it could. And when you agitate, I just go straight up and down, not side to side. They say it can warp the blade by going side to side. I don't know if that's really true or not, but I'll pretend it is. So once let me turn this off really quick. So once I've quenched this, I like to grab it with the rag and wipe off the scale. It's one decent way to tell if you've gotten a good quench, is if you did, you get all this scale build up on here and it comes off really easily. It's not 100% definite way of telling if you got a good quench or not, but be pretty hopeful when you see it. And then, so I will check for warping. So kind of look at this straight on, and we're pretty good. The tang's kind of shifting to one side a little bit, but we're okay. So I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna lock it down in the vise. And that way it'll cool it a little quicker and kind of help keep it straight as it's cooling. So here you can see I just basically locked it down in here. If I had a longer blade, what I'll do is I'll take these pieces of angle iron and I'll put them inside the vise to give me essentially a longer vise if I have a longer blade. But because this one's so short, it fits in the vise just fine. So here we are at the tempering area. So depending on how many knives I have, I will sometimes use the kiln to temper, but because I've only got one knife, I'm just going to use this toaster oven, and toaster ovens are notoriously inaccurate. So what I've done is I've actually taken this one and I've insulated it just a little bit so it holds heat a little bit better. I mean, the glass door doesn't help, but it holds heat better. And then I've made this temperature controlled PID, which I use for a lot of different things. But I'm going to temper this at 400 degrees. Just like that. So we'll set that at 400, keeps the temperature. I've actually got a thermocouple in the top here that runs down inside, kind of right in the middle of the area. And this thing does a really good job. The higher the heat, the higher the temper, the more accurate it stays. But you know, for a toaster oven, it does well. And then this PID, it was pretty inexpensive to make. But like I said, I use this for a lot of things. I've got another toaster oven that I do my stabilizing with my handle material, and it works really well for that as well. So this has gotten up to temp and stabilized quite a bit. So when you first turn this on, it'll go way past the heat and then come back down below, and then it'll start stabilizing in there. So I'm just gonna pop this in. We're still nice and straight. It's a small, thicker knife, so I wasn't too worried about the warping. But if you want to, you can also clean up the edge of this just to watch the temper colors pop through, just to ensure by the color that you're at the right temperature. But we're okay on here. So I'm going to throw this in here, kind of try to keep that in the middle. And our target for tempering, 400 degrees, which according to the chart should take us to about 60 to 61 Rockwell if we've gotten the quench correct and everything. And we're going to do 2 temper cycles at 2 hours apiece. So we're going to leave this in here for 2 hours. We're going to come back, and you can either let it cool on its own to room temperature, or you can dunk it in some water. I haven't had an issue with either way. And then we're going to put it back in once it's down to room temperature and do another 2 hours. And after that, the heat treat on this blade is complete. The tempering is complete. Ooh, it's warm. Okay, so this is now a knife. We basically just have to clean it up and put some bevels on it, and you know, guard handle, all that. But this is a nice hardened piece of steel now. See how long I can hold on to this for. So, yep, that's warm. You can see the pattern in there, actually, which looks like it should be pretty good. But anyway, so this is basically how you harden 80 CRV2. It's a pretty simple steel to work with. I just wanted to say thank you for stopping by as usual, and we'll see you in the next video.